Hello lovelies, I'm Shani Haynes and thank you for joining me for the Woodies basket tutorial. We're using Autumn Splendor by Mintay. So here's a little close-up of the finished project, which is so much fun to make. Okay, so I'm going to show you what tools I use that may be handy for you when you're making your own wooden basket. So I'm just showing you there quickly that it does actually fit some cards. It'll fit 20 if you're doing my 20 card class. Otherwise you could use it for any other holder for something. Okay, so here's what I used. I used a heat gun, a nail file, or you can just use a little bit of sandpaper, but I find that rough, coarse nail file perfect. Excuse me. Just your common-sized hole punch, a pencil, some sort of glitter brush. Now this is a Wink of Stella. You can also use a Winkle. 2 lots of glue. One's a bit stronger than the other. The green one's just craft glue. The other one's a bit stronger. Some foam adhesive and some cardboard or chipboard just to mount things up a little higher. Some good tweezers, very handy, and a bone folder just to smooth out your gluing. I've used heavy gesso, so any gesso, just a white matte gesso, just to coat your resin pieces before you use paint. Now this is just a cheap paint I had in my stash. It was just the right sort of shade of blue that worked with the paper. I also, again, just used a brown acrylic, a white acrylic, as you can see that's just from Kmart, and an orange acrylic, which I don't know where I got that, in my cupboard somewhere. So I just wanted some autumn colours, and a yellow acrylic, which I found at Aldi. I used 3 different coloured Distress Oxide inks, the Vintage Photo Spiced Marmalade, which I just wanted some yellow, and a barn door colour, which sort of like a rusty red, I guess you could say, and some blending brushes. These last 2 bright colours aren't essential, but it was just to darken or give a bit more life to some of my autumn leaves that were a little bit dull. I also used a craft mat and a craft knife. So let's check out what should be in your kit. 60 paper die cuts, full of gorgeous little images. A 6x8 add-on paper pack, which is what you'll be using to cover your basket. Lots of lovely different designs. And of course you use what paper you want to use. You don't have to use mine, the one I used. This is the Woodies pack, and that's the order number there. And it's called the basket. And let's open this and have a look what's inside. I didn't open this pack. I actually had my own pack open, but they pop out quite easily because they are laser cut. So you want to open your Woodies pack. Don't worry about the bit of paint there. I have got ahead of myself and painted some things. Because I assembled it, I couldn't get that bit off, so I left it connected. Okay, and here we are with, I've also just used some tacky glue, which is similar to craft glue, basically is craft glue. And I have, excuse me, got a little paintbrush, and I'm going to basically assemble this basket with a tiny bit of glue just to help hold it. Now, if you use this QR code that comes with your pack, it will give you a video showing you how to assemble it, but I basically just followed that, so you can just do what I'm doing if you want to. But with every Woodies, there is that QR code, and you can click onto that and it'll show you how to assemble whatever Woodies from Mintay that you have got. So I do advise you paint a little bit. If you want to paint your basket, I'd paint it a little bit like I have before you assemble it. Definitely be a bit easier. And just a tiny bit of glue. You don't need a lot because it actually does hold together quite well without glue, but they do recommend you do glue it, and you don't want it falling apart once it's assembled and decorated. I found the laser side, the cut part, which is a little bit darker, actually went well when you put it in. So face the laser cut be in to the piece, and you'll find it will assemble a lot easier. Okay, I'm just cleaning up the glue as I go here. Now I'm just adding the slats. So you can see I've got the clean side on the outside, and it does tend to slot in a lot easier. Okay. Just pops in. And just keep going up the sides. I didn't paint these slats because they're going to be completely covered except for the ends. So if you wanted to paint them now, you can. Because this was the first time I made this, I didn't paint them, but hindsight, I probably would have painted the sides, but it didn't really make a difference in the end. Okay, so that's one side done, and turn over and repeat. Now, if you want to have the slats showing instead of a solid basket like I had, then you just cut your pieces of paper to fit those strips. So you can see it does fit better one way than the other. Okay, I did actually have glue on all of those pieces. I just didn't show you me doing it. Okay, and the handle just slots into, and I did actually have glue on the handles as well. So, well, I just made sure it fitted. Sorry. Don't need much because it's pretty strong. It holds in there pretty easily. So there, look how easy and fast that was to assemble. Okay, so now we are, I've chosen my paper. Measurements will be written down under the YouTube. 4 7/8 by 4 3/4, 2 pieces of that, and 8 1/8 by 4 1/2, 2 pieces of that. Now, when I first made this, I actually had this paper, Country Fair, and it's number 1. That is not in your kit, and I apologise, that's just what I had, and I loved the woodwork. I didn't like the other side, obviously, but I loved the woodwork. And I had enough, because it was 1 12 by 12 sheet, I actually had enough to cover the whole outside of the basket. Now, you'll be getting this kit. It only has 3 sheets. I found it does have that wood look, which is very, very similar, but it's only got 3 sheets, so you'll only have enough to cover 3 sides with that wood, and I do apologise, but I do have a few spare bits of this big paper, unless you can get your hands on it or something similar. So this is designed to sit on the 2 big sides. I just pegged it just to show you where it's going to put it, but you could do maybe the wood on the big sides and then a different pattern on the 2 short sides if you wanted to. And of course the handle I did wood as well, so you might want to coordinate that with something. Now these measurements are pretty close, but you might want to tweak them, trim them off a little bit. I'll show you a bit later that I did take off a bees whisker off some of the bottom of all the pieces, just so they didn't overlap. Or you can glue them on and sandpaper them off, it's up to you, but it's probably easy just to trim them. Okay, now I'm just going to use the Vintage Photo from the Distress Oxide to ink my edges. If you're an inker, this is the time to do it. I think it just adds a bit more character to the paper and the finished product. I also inked over the paintwork with the same ink, just to give it a little bit more character again, a bit more wear and tear, soften the patina of it all. Okay, so once you've done that, it's time to glue on your paper. Now, like I said, I've done a whole solid sheet. If you wanted to match the slats, you could just cut that paper up into 3 equal parts that fit, but I don't have the measurements for that. You would have to measure that yourself. And also keep in mind that if you want the edges rounded, you'll have to sand each piece, each little corner. I found it easy to put the glue straight onto the wood. It's a bit of a sticky, fun situation there, but the paintbrush really did help. So once that's on, I just smoothed and worked the glue right into the paper. The paper's very, very thick, and I think it's the thickest scrapbook paper I've probably worked with for years. It's beautiful quality. It's very thirsty, and you do need to really work that glue into the paper to make sure it does stick. So even though I've sped it up, I did spend a fair bit of time massaging that paper into the glue and onto the wood. Okay, so that's the 2 sides. Again, I'm just massaging. And you can use your bone folder for this if you don't have that. Okay, now I'm just showing you the sides with the little round, that sort of rounded off on the corners. So I've just got this really handy, it is a nail file, but I actually only use it for craft. It's really good to just gently take off and round off the edges, but make sure your glue's dry or it could rip the paper. So just gently encourage, see how quick that can be, just to take off that sharp little corner, which can catch and maybe make your paper rip off a little bit. So it's worth just rounding it off for a nice finish. If your paper overlaps underneath, mine did a little bit, but I didn't sand that off. I just left that. But you can sand it right down to perfect if you want. And then I just touched up the corners with the vintage photo ink, which can be done last, but I just did it as I went. And now the 2 sides, and like I said, you may not have enough paper, so you might have to use a different paper for this side, for the sides. Okay, so I've just lined it up with the bottom of that handle. I did trim off a little bit off the bottom. Again, working that glue all over there, the wood. It is quite a tight fit. It does fit quite nice. And you can easily clean the glue up if there's a little bit showing. So that's quite flush and quite tight to the handle there. Just smoothing and massaging that paper into the glue, so it's focusing on the corners because that's where it tends to lift first, as you may notice. So I'm really, really working that glue in. And with the other side, just repeating. Now, of course, you could put paint right to the edges on all the sides if you wanted to, but I didn't worry. That's the fun of me doing this project first. You get to see it and see how you can improve it. I'm quite used to that, and I love to see what you make, so please do share. Okay, so I'm just making sure those corners are stuck down really, really well. And I'm just gently massaging the corners over the edge, and I do sand them off, which I've done, and now I'm just inking again those little edges. I thought it was good to do it while you're doing that area so you don't forget. Now I'm just selecting some paper for the inside of the basket. Again, this is completely up to you. One sheet will basically do one side. Now the sheets for the inside, I did have the measurements here in front of me, but they've moved. Hang on. Okay, so the inside paper, the two long pieces are 7 5/8 by 4 1/2 inches. And it's actually just under 4 1/2 inches, just a tiny little bit off. And I actually put glue on the paper this time, not on the wood. But as you can see, I did have to measure them and I'm giving you the measurement so you don't have to go through this as I did. So it's 7 5/8 by 4 1/2. And it's just under 4 1/2. But you'll see that when you do a dry fit, you know how much you have to take off, just a tiny little bit. The short sides are 4 1/2 by just under 5 inches. So again, you may need to do a dry fit first and just trim off a bee's whisker off the sides. Before gluing them all in, I did ink mine again with the vintage photo ink. And as mentioned, I did actually put glue on the paper this time and not on the wood. A little hindsight tip, a little tip for you before maybe putting the insides in. Maybe you might want to touch up a little bit like I'm doing with coordinating or matching paint that I've already painted parts of my basket with. I thought it looked very obvious once I started that I needed to do the sides and the top with the same colour paint, and it did make a huge difference. So depending on what paint you use, this is just a chalk paint. You may need to do 2 coats, let it dry and do a second coat before adding the paper inside. It did make a big difference to the appearance. Now I'm just gluing on the 2 sides, and I use the cute polka dot paper, which does match this paint really well, but this paper is so beautiful that I don't think it mattered if it was coordinating or contrasting colour paint that you use. I'm now just gluing or fitting the base piece in, which I used 4 7/8 by 7 6/8 of an inch. And again, you may not have enough wood to do this. You may have to choose a different piece, but it's just the bottom, and rarely will that be seen because you have it full of goodies. But always do a dry fit before you glue things in. Excuse me. Now you can either, do what I'm doing and cover your handle with some paper, or just leave it painted. I originally was just going to leave it painted, and then I thought, maybe I could actually cover it because I had enough paper left over. Easy enough to do. I hope you've kept your wooden scraps. Just trace where the handle came out Now, obviously, you'll need to do this twice to trace to have both sides of your handle covered. This piece was big enough to fit the whole handle, so I just cut it out on the line, excuse me, and because it was on the inside of the wood, it was basically a perfect fit. So I was quite happy with that. Once I knew it fit really well, I just inked the edges, getting it ready to attach to the handle. Again, applying glue directly to the wood because I know it did actually fit really well, and you can wipe off any excess glue if there's too much there. I wanted to cover the other side of the basket as well. Didn't have enough paper that was big enough left over, so I just, as you can see, had some gaps missing on the both ends, missing on there. So what I did was just found some scraps and filled that in. So I just traced the scraps to get that perfect angle because it is a tricky little triangle, and just hand trimmed it so it would just fill in the gaps. And the little trick to not making this join look obvious is do not ink where the paper joins to meet each other. So I'm just gluing the little bits in first so they go underneath the major piece that's going to cover the handle. And then this time I put glue on the paper. Which has been inked, but like I said, I didn't ink where that paper joins. And yes, you may see a little join, but it's not too obvious. And this is the back of the basket, so it probably won't even be seen. So there we have a little handle. And if you wanted to trace these bits too, you can, because you've got the template there. But I then didn't want to have to cut out that little hole in the middle, and all just got a bit busy. Now we're going to have some fun. I've got the Mintay chippies, which is number D20. So they are the bird cages. I have these in stock if you wanted a whole pack. Absolutely gorgeous. Now see that blue bit of paper, that 12 by 12, don't throw that out. That's a great piece of scrapbook paper that you can use for your cards or scrapbooking. Now I just cut out one bird cage, so you will just get a random bird cage from this set, if one big one, or if I've only got little ones left, you'll get two small ones, which you can actually just slightly put over the top of, join them together and make it a bigger piece, one on top of the other, just overlapping. I've just used a craft knife to carefully cut the little bits of wood off, little bits of chipboard off, and sanded it gently. Now, I know this is a dauber, a sponge for ink, but I'm finding it really useful to use for painting. I love it. And it comes apart, gets washed up, dries really fast because the sponge is very thin. So, and it really disperses the paint very well onto the chippy. This is how I also painted my woody, my wood basket. So I actually did paint both sides, let it dry, and did the edges as well. But I didn't worry about the inside parts of it. Now I've just selected some paper to coordinate or contrast, traced it. Now that's where that little hole punch came in handy. I had planned to put a ribbon through that, but I ended up not doing it. But I think I still show you what I did do. Now I'm just going to glue the bird cage onto the contrasting piece of paper. So I didn't really need to paint the back of this, but I did. It doesn't matter. Learn as we go, don't we? And that was quite easy. I'm just using a cotton tip to take out any excess glue, which really probably doesn't matter because most of it's going to be covered with cute die cuts anyway. Inking just to match the rest of the project with the Vintage Photo by Distressed Oxide. Again, probably didn't need to ink the back, but a little bit does show. It depends how high you place this on your basket. Okay, here we are. I'm putting through this lovely turquoise coloured ribbon. It does coordinate beautifully, especially matches the rubber boots, but I then found it too much. But if you want to, you can put a ribbon through. There's not one in your kit because I didn't end up using it. If you're interested, I do sell that ribbon by the metre, $1 a metre. If you want some, just sing out. But you can add anything to that. And then I tried a brown ribbon. I tried all sorts. And then I thought, no, I don't actually want a ribbon at all, which is very unlike me because I do love my ribbons. Now I'm just using the gesso. It doesn't have to be heavy gesso, just any gesso, just over the resin leaves to make a nice, excuse me, medium for the paint to stick to. So just painting all over the leaves and the sides with the gesso. Now I'm adding the paints. The gesso's dried. I'm adding some yellow, some white, some orange. I thought this orange was a little too bright, and I didn't shake it. Make sure you shake your paints. But it wasn't too bright, it actually was brilliant. Now I wanted to match these leaves to the die cut leaves, so I just used it there as a guide for colour. So obviously starting with the lighter colours first, so that's a yellow. It's almost a little bit mustardy when it's mixed with the white, which has worked really well. And a little tip, if you don't mix the paints perfectly, you're going to get a beautiful different shades on your leaf, like a natural leaf. So don't be too fussy, just get the paint on, let it dry, do another coat, just have a play. This was actually one of my favourite parts of this whole project. Now that paint I think was a little bit diluted because I wasn't mixed well, but it still came out okay. A little bit watery because I thought it would be a lot brighter than that, but of course it has gone over the top of the yellow. So just keep playing, and you can wipe it off and start again carefully if you're not happy. I just let it dry and came back. I did use my heat gun to dry off a little bit before I did this next layer. So I added a little bit of chocolatey brown because they are autumn leaves. Be careful when you do wipe it off because you may take off all the layers, even the gesso. Okay, so I'm just brushing over a little bit of the brown. Have some fun. I enjoyed this part. And then once you're happy, you can set them aside to dry. Right, now it's the fun time to decorate your bird-cage. These are from the die pack. So I've got a big autumn leaf. I've got the gorgeous little picket fence with the pumpkins. And don't be scared to overhang. I've put some dimensionals under that leaf. When I'm doing 3D, I do like to reinforce with a bit of glue, because it is going to be more permanent than a card and on display, so it probably needs to be secured a little bit more. Now I've got using that gorgeous umbrella, again overhanging off the birdcage. One of the mushrooms just snuck there underneath the pumpkin. The gorgeous rubber boots. Now this one's glued flat on top of the pumpkin. And the other one I do mount up on some adhesive foam or dimensionals. You, of course, can do yours differently, or you can follow what I did. Now, that leaf I actually tucked under the picket fence, just glued it directly to it. One of the gorgeous hedgehogs, he's just snug in there, glued flat, snug in under the pumpkin a little bit. This is one of the resin leaves that I've poured, and it's dry, and I'm just putting that as an accent over the picket fence. I'm using another autumn leaf, tucking that in under the rubber boots flat. And I'm just putting a dimensional directly onto the pumpkin and adding one of the acorns. A little bit of glitter glue or glitter pen from This Is the Wink of Stella, or you could be using a winkle. I didn't colour solid, I just added a little bit of sparkle on the leaves and followed the lines on a lot of the images, just for a little pop of sparkle. Okay, now I'm going to mount this to my basket. I'm using some chipboard just to lift it up a little bit so it's not flat on the basket, and then you can choose whether you want to have it straight or on an angle. I liked it a little bit on an angle, but just make sure it doesn't go over the bottom, so when the basket stands up it's not scratching or touching the tabletop. Okay, now I had all these extra autumn leaves, but they were a little bit dull for me. I wanted the brighter look, so I just made them brighter. And this is when I brought in the spiced marmalade and the barn door distressed oxide inks. Of course, you use whatever colours you have that coordinate and work with this colour palette. So always starting with the lighter colour first, and then just a little bit of this sort of burnt orangey red. And as you can see, it just completely uplifts the leaf colour and brightens it up, because they have given us quite a lot of leaves, but these were a little bit too brown for me. So don't be afraid to do your own thing. Okay, so now I'm going to just decorate the handle a little bit, because remember, it is the handle. People will naturally want to pick it up by that. So I sort of tried to keep it to one side. I've used the autumn leaf that I've coloured, and there's the resin leaf. So it's all a bit of a dry fit, and I'm just snugging everything in. The glue is nice and gives you a nice wiggle time, so everything's still movable. I'm using a stronger glue for the resin. Just to get that where I want it. And then everything's better with a squirrel on top. So there he is. I love those little woodland animals, gorgeous. So that's your handle. We've got one resin piece left. Now you can put that wherever you want, obviously. I thought, oh, no, I'm not there yet. I added another, because that piece was mounted, that whole piece, I could actually sneak in another leaf underneath. And again, that was one of the ones I hand coloured, just to finish off that little vignette. And then carefully, because things are still drying, I wanted to add that last little resin leaf. I thought it was just cute on the end there, on its own, quite sweet. And there you have, my loves, your little gorgeous Autumn Splendor basket by Mintay. And I thank you for booking in for this kit, ordering the kit. If you have, if not, I hope you can source your products somewhere and have a lot of fun making it. So have a great day. Hugs. Bye.